Hey everyone, it's Danny Dhaiphong. Welcome back to the show. Hit that like button as you come onto the program. We have a very intensive and in-depth show for you today, so do not miss it. NATO is reeling and Ukraine is in panic as Russia, fresh off major diplomatic achievements in China over the past 4 days, launched a crushing drone and aerial attack which saw over 500 drones propel themselves at targeted military locations across Ukraine. Trump is disappointed, he says, but has spent much of his time in recent weeks punishing everyone, or attempting to at least, associated with Russia, not named China. As Trump watches on as Russia gets closer and closer to China, North Korea, and the rest of the global south, the destruction of Ukraine and NATO looms closer and closer. To discuss all of this and more, I have three good friends of the show. First, we have Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector, U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer, author, geopolitical analyst, and journalist. Scott, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Great to be back here. And Garland Nixon, he is also a geopolitical commentator, analyst, and he is the host of his own YouTube show. Both Scott and Garland now have their own YouTube shows by their own name. Garland Nixon, good to see you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, and then we have Andrei Martyanov. He is a military analyst, geopolitical analyst, author, and he also has a YouTube channel as well, Smoothie. You can find that in the video description. Andrei, good to see you again.
My pleasure.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin then. I want to talk about, there's been reports in the Western mainstream media talking about the scale of Russia's strikes of late. This comes as Vladimir Putin just got off a 4-day visit from China. And as this was happening, we had the Washington Post say, well, strikes against Ukraine have actually cooled in August, but now there's panic because they have ramped up ever since the Alaska summit. And we have here the latest. NATO scrambles jets as Russia launches more than 500 drones and missiles at Ukraine. They are talking about Poland being on high alert about Russia's attacks. Now, I wanted to begin with this, Scott, with you to talk about where exactly we are, because we have Russia continuing its, its campaign. There has been no letting up, and these attacks, according to Western mainstream media, are actually becoming more frequent following diplomatic meetings in an attempt to frame Russia as aggressors and as being aggressive during this time of U.S.-Russia talks, or at least what is left of them after what seems to be a bit of a stall. Your assessment of where we exactly are and what Russia is actually doing, contrary to Western mainstream media punditry.
Well, I mean, nothing happens in a vacuum. Russia doesn't wake up one morning and say arbitrarily, let's do this, that, or the other thing. I think what we're seeing in the targeting that's taking place by Russia is a couple things. One, that Russia is serious about bringing it into this conflict on terms that are acceptable to Russia, meaning that Russia and Russia alone will dictate the outcome of this war. Two, how utterly responsible Russia has been in the prosecution of this conflict. We're seeing two categories of targets being hit of late. That and the West is calling this, the escalation. One is Russia's hitting defense industry facilities. And you have to ask yourself, well, why now? I mean, why haven't they been striking them before? See, Russia's goal and objective is not to terminate Ukraine's ability to function as a modern industrial state. And so Russia strikes defense industry facilities that produce capabilities that threaten Russia. And what we've seen lately is that the West has been shifting ballistic missile technology, drone technology from, Western sources, in the case of Turkish sources, to Ukrainian soil, and been on the cusp of preparing actual weapons that can be fired against Russia. And Russia has identified these locations and taken them out. And they've done so in a very aggressive fashion. It's Russia's goal and objective to ensure that Ukraine doesn't have the capacity to launch these weapons that in many cases are designed in the West and and are produced using tools and other production means that have been brought into Ukraine by the West. Russia is taking them out. And the other thing is Russia now has decided they are going to be more aggressive in targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure in response to Ukraine's totally, I can't say, I was going to say irresponsible, but hey, it's war. Ukraine has been targeting Russia's oil refining capability. Clearly, the British have played a very big role in tracking this, and the Ukrainians have been fairly effective in hitting it. And Russia has just said enough is enough. And now Russia is going to come back in a disproportionate response, meaning that Ukraine will now be crippled energy-wise. This was Ukraine's choice. Ukraine opted to escalate to this level, and now Ukraine will pay a price. But this is what we're seeing here, together with Russia's ongoing targeting of Western munitions that make their way into Ukraine, aircraft, anti-air capabilities, etc. But we are seeing an escalation in the air campaign. Then on the ground, it's just, again, Russian dominance all over. I think the other guys can talk to that just as well as I can.
Yeah, Andrei, how about to you? What's your assessment of the situation now, as there were diplomatic talks between the U.S. and Russia, but the Western mainstream media, Europe, continuously says, well, Russia's being an aggressor now. Despite these talks, what's your assessment of what's actually going on?
It's very simple, really. I just have a magnificently powerful tool. It's called pencil. And there is another technology, which is extremely advanced, called piece of paper. So even when you make the basic calculation, and again, it's about correlation of forces. It means Europe has no voice here whatsoever. These are paper tiger militarily, they're impotent. So, and Ukraine is being destroyed as a state in the sense that military industrial capacity is being wiped out. And as Scott correctly pointed out, the energy also is being wiped out. And Russia can continue with this for as long as it's required, because obviously when you talk about mainstream media in the West, Hunter Thompson gave a very good definition of the press and media, in his Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And I won't use those verbiage here because otherwise we will get banned. But the point is, they create a lot of noise. It's irrelevant. And in terms of, for example, production of geraniums alone, there are other types of the drones, and there are, of course, types of the cruise missiles, all kinds of other stand of weapons. Russia produces 600 geraniums a day, daily. So he can continue to do it as long as it's required. And they can do whatever they want, produce a lot of hot air and a lot of noise. It doesn't change the simple realities on the ground. It is the only thing which really shapes everything about it. As I repeat this ad nauseam, Russia will talk to the United States. And there must be talks between Russia and the United States. These are two largest superpowers, and so it's necessary to maintain the world peace, for crying out loud, if we're going as far as that. In terms of Europe, it's absolutely irrelevant. It's an object. It's not a subject of international politics. And there actually the communications between Putin and Trump in Alaska, for example, and what is happening economically, there are separate tracks, if you wish. Special military operation, and Russians probably have blisters on their tongues, repeating the same thing. All aims, or political aims, will be achieved, including the removal of Zelensky regime, pure economic and other activity. Absolutely, United States and Russia, they're neighbors. We are neighbors, you know that. So it's just literally next to each other, and there are gigantic, resources also in the American part or sector of Arctic, which, is America's ticket out of the well, if not, if not the catastrophe completely, but at least instead of crashing, it will be hard landing, but the country will survive and will continue on. Europe is done. It's over.
Same question you, Garland. Oh, sorry. Hold on. There you go.
Give me the question again.
Oh, just what's your assessment of the situation, given that Russia is being said to be ramping up these attacks, but at the same time, there is these talks that have been going on prior to them as they go on. What's your assessment of where we really are right now?
Well, where we are is Russia's continuing to do what they do, which is to eradicate the enemy. I think part of their denazification plan is the long-term destruction of the military capabilities of Ukraine, both personnel and war material. You know, I've said for a long time, what Russia turned Ukraine into is a NATO garbage compactor. You throw war material in there, you throw tanks and M777s and all the wonder weapons, you throw Ukrainian personnel and or mercenaries in there, and Russia will destroy them. And when the trash compactor is empty, fill it again, and Russia will destroy it again. I think that's what Russia's doing. I think Russia recognizes that there's even a NATO plan for the conclusion of the so-called conclusion of the conflict, at which time whatever's left of Ukrainians' resources, male and or female resources, they'll try to use them for some kind of a dirty war. And I think Russia's plan is to eliminate all of those resources as necessary and to completely break the back of Ukraine, so that at the conclusion of this, the people that are left in Ukraine have no will to fight, and they just want this thing over and to be, you know, to get back to some kind of life. So I don't think Russia has a time limit on this. I don't think they're, you know, ramping up or ramping down. They have targets, they're striking the targets, and they will continue as the NATO trash compactor fills. They'll continue to empty it until there's nothing left for NATO to put in the trash compactor.
Yeah, no, a very good points, Garland and everyone. Now, I wanted Scott to get to now Trump's reaction to all of this, because this is how he has been taking the developments that we just discussed.
I'm very disappointed in him. He and I always had a great relationship. I'm very disappointed. Thousands of people are dying. They're not Americans that are dying, but they're Russians and they're Ukrainians, and there's thousands, and it's a war that makes no sense. And it would have never started if I were president, and that's what bothers me even more, because the election was totally rigged, and it's a shame. We'll see what happens, but I'm very disappointed in President Putin. I can say that, and we'll be doing something to help people live. You know, it's not a question of Ukraine. It's help people live.
Scott, he will be doing something to help people live. What's your reaction to that? Oh, sorry. Hold on.
Is he going to send 3,200 Iran missiles to? I mean, because they deliver humanitarian goods, right? I mean, these missiles. Helping Ukraine get offensive strike capability so that you level the play. I mean, he has no plan. Sanctioning. Scott Besson's talking about sanctioning. He literally has no plan. But I think that's actually part of the plan. And I'll tell you why. Let's look at the Iran missile, the ERAM, Extended Range Attack Missile, whatever the A stands for. 3,200 of these. I mean, it's a big deal. They announced it. $850 million. The Europeans are paying for it, and they're going to give them to the Ukrainians. The problem is, when you read the small print, first of all, they haven't totally committed to giving them to the Ukrainians. And one of the reasons is the missile doesn't exist. There's a $34 million contract out with one of the primary contractors whose job it is to produce a prototype missile. But that prototype is to be delivered in October of 2025. That's next month. So the prototype doesn't even exist yet. Once you have the prototype, then you have to subject it to a whole bunch of tests and everything. And then once it's approved, and they could fast track it, but it would take some months to do that. Then you go into serial production. But before you can have serial production, you got to get all the other components lined up. It takes time. Got to get contractors cleared for this, production space allocated. They don't even know where they're going to build them yet. There is no production hall, no tools. It's a prototype. And so, according to the news, the maximum production output that's estimated once ERAM goes into production is 1,000 missiles a year. So, working off of what we know, the prototype will be available sometime in October. Let's say they just rush it forward, and then 6 months later, they're able to magically start, going into production. Where are we now? Gosh, we're talking about, April, May, where they can start producing things of 2026. To get 1,000 produced, you'd have to go into full on. You don't go ramp up into full on production, but you'll crank out a couple. But you're literally talking 2030 before 3,200 of these missiles could even be conceivably manufactured. 2030, it's 2025. This is just a joke. It's an absolute disgrace to be out there talking about providing Ukraine with capabilities that everybody knows aren't going to be provided, which tells you that this is just posturing on the part of the president. The president understands that he has a tremendous amount of political pushback. This pushback comes from people like Marco Rubio, his Secretary of State / National Security Advisor, who hates Russia and everything about Russians and is sabotaging the president left, right, everywhere he goes. Scott Bessent, longtime Russophobe. The only words he knows when it comes to Russia is tariffs, sanctions. That's it. He doesn't want a compromise. He doesn't want any deal made. Mike Ratcliffe, the CIA director, Russophobe in the extreme, doesn't like what Tulsi Gabbard's doing exposing Russiagate. Doesn't like Tulsi Gabbard exposing the fact that all the Russian analysts in the CIA are Russophobes. They don't know anything about Russia. They just got their job because they learned to say Vladimir Putin bad. And they went, oh, yeah, you're qualified to do this job. There's the only people that even remotely support what the president's doing is J.D. Vance, the vice president. That's an important ally. Steve Witkoff, but he's an envoy. He's not a policy originator. He's a policy implementer. And Tulsi Gabbard, but she often finds her wings clipped. They just put Aaron Lucas, a longtime Russophobe, CIA operative, in as her deputy. So, he's there to monitor her to make sure she doesn't go too crazy. This is the fact. And the other fact is, I just got back from Russia, and I'll tell you, the Russians understand this. So anybody who's sitting there going, oh, how's Vladimir Putin taking the Trump temper tantrum? Doesn't care. Water off a duck's back. The Russians are fully cognizant of the fact that Donald Trump is carrying this load by himself. The Russians do believe that Trump wants peace. And if given the opportunity, will create, the conditions for peace. But the Russians aren't under any illusion that Donald Trump is able to conceive and implement policy without pushback. There are tremendous forces arrayed against Donald Trump right now. And half the things he does right now is designed to appease the people who have the knives out because he dared meet with Vladimir Putin in Alaska.
Yeah, Andrei, your take on Trump's response, it appears Donald Trump wants to get out of Ukraine, regardless of the reasons. But that doesn't seem to be happening, and Trump's frustrations are boiling over. Sometimes it appears that he's powerless. I don't necessarily agree with that, but at the same time, that is how it appears. What is your assessment of Trump's reaction to Russia continuing its campaign?
Scott absolutely correctly pointed this out. First, I applaud him for bringing this Iran thing. Russians laugh at it. And the fact is, Iran is nothing more than some kind of variations on JDAM stuck with their engine there, just to make sure that it is some kind of the missile, which in reality is flying bomb. Essentially, yeah, and Scott correctly pointed out it's not even in the prototype stage. Forget about initial operational capability. But the point, he also is correct. It's classic Trump administration. What Trump does, he gets around people who are ready to kill him, around himself. And he calls this a wonderful administration, beautiful. That's what his favorite term. It's a beautiful administration. So, I mean, if he doesn't know what he's doing, what can I say? And Scott absolutely correctly states that Russians are cognizant about this. Fact is, there are memes now going around. Okay, let's be very frank. They are laughing openly about this whole thing. It's about this, forget me not type thing. Which day, I mean, he loves Putin, which day he doesn't. It's complete schizophrenia, essentially, on part of the US administration, and Trump is the culprit. Despite the fact, whatever his intentions are, the real strategist and the real statesman, actually, whatever his intentions are, he finds the team for that. The problem is he is constantly completely dependent on his donors, and he comes completely under the control of the neocons, and you know what? He can wish whatever he wants, but yeah, Russians don't care. So, and as already have been stated, as I constantly repeat, there are blisters on the tongues of Russian officials, from Vladimir Putin to Rybkov to Lavrov to what have you, that special military operation will continue until all objectives are met. Simple as that. And most what we observe here, it's the schizophrenic reaction of the mainstream media, all those pandit class, the fourth estate, so to speak, people who have no clue actually what they are talking about. The only thing they are good at is narrative. And so, yes, Scott correct also that Trump doesn't have real intelligence. There are no real intelligence in intelligence community in the United States and elsewhere regarding Russia, because the only guys they have, they're the Russophobes. It's not even Russophobes. Russophobes are people who are afraid. They have the visceral hatred of Russia. And as a result, what do you expect from them? And they are not qualified to provide a serious professional analysis and forecasting. But I made in my career in the United States in the last second decade already, pointing this out. So, and what can I say? They can say whatever they want. They can introduce whatever they want. It's irrelevant now. That's the whole point. And especially after Beijing and especially after Tianjin, Russians don't care. If United States doesn't get, or Mr. Trump in this particular case, doesn't get his off-ramp, those people he surrounded himself with, they will make sure that United States is completely run into the ground. Because those people, all those CIA director Rubio, the boy is actually Adelson's, caretaker. He's a lawyer. He knows nothing really about real statesmanship and especially international relations. But you know what? Now he is both Secretary of the State and, of course, the National Security Advisor. Trump appointed him. I'm sorry. So what can I say? It is what it is.
Yeah, Garland, same question, same situation to you. Your assessment.
A couple of things. Number one, I think the Russians recognize that Donald Trump, for the most part, is speaking internally. That Donald Trump is not making some original statement that he just thought up on himself or on his own about the situation. He is speaking to the internal enemies, the internal factions that are warring against him and that are, constantly nipping at his heels. So the things that Donald Trump says is to deal with internal problems and the instability of the empire that he's dealing with. I also think that the Russians, the answer to how the Russians view this was in China. The Russians have moved on. The Russians are doing the things necessary to strengthen their economic and interest. I also think that they see the United States as an unstable, nuclear armed adversary that they have to manage. I think they understand that the EU is facing catastrophic economic problems and will likely soon fall into some kind of a revolutionary uprising, but that the United States is, though it's unstable politically, it's certainly more stable than the European Union in the long run. And so they're going to have to manage unstable adversaries as they move forward into the new world with the Indias and the Chinas and the global South that's on the rise. So I whenever I hear this stuff from Trump, my reaction is always this: I don't really care what Trump says. I watch the actions that he takes next, because he's just talking to the people around him and dealing with those internal issues.
Yeah, and Scott, so I wanted to now discuss this that's been bandied about by the collective West, by NATO, and by Trump himself, and just in different framings on how it gets done. This buildup, there's all this talk about a buildup for Ukraine, and that this will be more potent than any security guarantee, as I'm sure you've been following. Especially Europe, talking about how important it is to have security guarantees that are completely antithetical to everything Russia has said. But nonetheless, this is what the New York Times is saying, that Ukraine is pursuing a multi-billion-dollar arms buildup that would be funded by Europe as the best chance of ensuring long-term survival. Scott, what is this all about? Is this even possible? And what do you make of what the impact of this new trajectory? Europe keeps talking about how Russia is not really for peace as it ramps up these attacks and continues its campaign, but here they're talking about continuing to militarize Ukraine, which is one of the big goals of Russia, is to do the opposite. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, let's just make it very clear. This is fantasy. The reality is that Russia will not accept conflict termination terms that don't involve demilitarization. Demilitarization means just that. It's the significant reduction in the size of Ukraine's NATO trained and equipped army, to take NATO out of it. And there will be no defense, there will be no meaningful defense industry left. It won't be allowed to exist. This is why Russia has said there won't be a ceasefire, that the conflict ends when the conflict ends on terms that address the root causes of this war. And, the West doesn't seem to want to accept that reality. So Russia just continues on its path. We saw, Ursula von der Leyen speak the other day about Ukraine becoming the military forge of Europe, and she spoke about Ukraine's military being actually the first European army, meaning that we train these people, we equip these people. This is our army, and we have to use it wisely. And together with that, what Ukraine is saying is, they recognize the political reality that no matter how much tough talk there is in Europe about deploying troops to Ukraine, there won't be European troops and organized military formations on Ukrainian soil for a number of reasons. First and foremost, again, Russia won't allow it. But the other one is that they just can't deploy them. So what Ukraine is saying is, rather than give up on us, just give us the ability to build long-range strike weapons, so that once we get this ceasefire and we have a frozen conflict, and we can begin building our factories and we'll produce this. This is just Ukraine's. This is a British-driven plan called "Keep Ukraine in the Fight." It's something British MI6, together with the Foreign Office, have been pursuing since 2023. The disastrous Ukrainian summer counteroffensive. The goal is to make sure that the West doesn't abandon Ukraine. And so what you need to do is create the perception that Ukraine is staying in the fight. And by talking about building these, the ability to have their own missile production, everything. Remember, they're not talking about having it now. They can't. Russia's blowing them all up. They're talking about having it once the war stops. That's how it becomes part of their security guarantees. Well, as I just said, they try and put these things in place right now. They get blown up. Russia's not going to allow any of this stuff to exist on Ukrainian soil. None of it. Zero. And when the war ends, it'll end when Russia says the war is over. So this is just European fantasy, Ukrainian fantasy. And tragically, what it does is it keeps this war going longer than it should be. 1.7 million dead or missing. That's a real number, not a fake number. If you look at it closely, 625,000 as of July of this year, dead, missing. That's, I'm just a simple Marine. I don't claim to be the greatest mathematician, but gosh, that comes up to around 90,000 a month. And things are just getting worse for the Ukrainians. So we're going to be talking about 110,000 a month by year's end. All right. That's dead, or missing. meaning you're never going to find them again. This war cannot be won, cannot be sustained. That's, I guess, the only good news with these casualties is there's no way in hell that Ukraine will be able to continue this fight for much longer. But the bad news is the West just seems to be more than happy to let these Ukrainians die. Again, these aren't trivial numbers. 90,000 right now a month. 90,000. And if this war continues, 100, 110,000. And if you think the Russians are taking similar casualties, you're smoking some strong stuff, man, because the Russian casualties are dropping as low as they go. I mean, Russia is in, again, this is a high intensity conflict. I mean, Russia's losing 176, 200, 215 dead, a week maybe. I mean, this is war. This ain't a joke. This is war. But the casualties Russia is suffering, while high, are easily replaceable. Russia is not only replacing them, but is putting in reserves that will come into play when Russia wants them to come into play. This war is so lopsided, it's not even funny right now. The Ukrainians don't get to rotate their troops in. You know what a troop rotation is from Ukraine? Being pulled out of a quiet zone of the war, being sent into the heavy part. That's your rotation, no rest. And as you're moving, you're getting hit. You get hit before you go in. Then once you get in, you got to retreat and you die. So they're just moving and dying. You know what Russians do? They go in, they fight for a couple of days, and then they get pulled out, rest, refit, while other guys come in, fresh troops, highly trained, well-equipped, motivated. Boom. And the Russians just keep rotating them in and out. The Russians are fresh. The Ukrainians are exhausted. This war is over.
Yeah, and given this, Andrei, how this is going to happen, despite what Scott is saying, that this is a fantasy, they're still trying. So the plan is to buy weapons from the United States. Trump seems happy with this as like a wash hands. I'm not doing anything, but Europeans can buy whatever they do with it. They do with it. But at the same time, what's your reaction to this overall plan that Scott just reacted to?
Well, Scott said it pretty much all. I mean, there's nothing real behind it. And when British plan anything military due to their pathetic level of their military education and military experience, they kill a lot of Ukrainians. Okay, they kill a lot of people, but yeah, this is not serious military. Their military educational institutions are a joke. Be them this vocational school from Sandhurst to whatever the King's College they teach there, or their so-called general staff college they have there. It's all a joke. It's a low level for pardon my French, for retards primarily. As a result, they do not have even understanding what the modern war is, or for that matter, what the old war is and how the casualties actually relate. It's obviously modeling after, Lanchester Ossipov, and when you look at the combat effectiveness, Scott is absolutely correct. And what can I say? I mean, they can dream whatever they want. Those are bad dreams of the empire, which is nothing more than a little stinky island, which fast approaching the third world levels standard of living. So, I mean, let them plan. The problem is that United States cannot provide anything anymore. I mean, it can provide maybe one card if they want. Russians will be happy to see it there because it's a good payout for the guys who will destroy it. So there is not a single weapon system in the NATO arsenal which can change anything on the tactical level. Forget about operational or strategic. And as a result, we have what we have, which is a catastrophe, and what many people also do not remember. This 1.7 millions, multiply them by 2 at least. You know what? That will be maimed, disabled, and all kinds of people who have been wounded, and some of PTSD, most likely, especially when you consider the intensity of this conflict. So that's what 1.7 plus 3.4, 5.1 million casualties. So, and this begins to affect, well, it already affecting profoundly whatever is left of Ukrainian society. And in terms of, they can dream like this. They created this flamingo, the ugly, gigantic flying something, which they try to sell to all those cretins in Brussels and elsewhere that it is some kind of valid weapon. Look at the effectiveness of Russian air defense, which only was growing, and this is so. If they think that this can make any difference, I have a bridge to sell. Prepayment. I will provide the account numbers later. So yeah, cash only. So and that's what is happening. But they wanted to do it to the last Ukrainian. Sure, Russians will accommodate them because, well, Russian people in general, and as you can see yourself from the latest polls, more than 80% support Vladimir Putin's policies. They understand what they're dealing with. And this is not against between Russia and Ukraine. This is between Russia and NATO. It's everybody understands this. So what can I say? It's over. But those Moros can still will manage to kill more people on Ukrainian side primarily. So, but if Ukrainians want to do it, let them do it. So what can I say?
Garland.
So they're talking about, massively rearming Ukraine. What do you mean by Ukraine? What do you if they could, which they couldn't? Who would man these weapons that they're bringing in? Ghosts? Because that's the only thing that's going to be left of the Ukrainian military. Let's not forget, a year or so ago, the Germans said they're going to rearm and they're going to come up with $800 million. Von der Leyen, remember this? $800 billion. All of these kind of numbers we were hearing a year ago from Germany and from the EU and etc. And now a year later, they don't have a dime. The average German can barely afford a beer and a schnitzel. The French and the Brits are on the verge of an absolute cataclysmic economic collapse. So the idea that countries that are flat broke are going to somehow rearm Ukraine, and they're going to send in a bunch of arms that will have to be manned by dead soldiers because they're all getting wiped out, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I guess I'm going to come up with a fleet of Rolls Royces also. That's it. I'll come up with a fleet of Rolls Royces, and they'll come up with a total, rearmament plan for Ukraine. And add this: what are the issues that they have? Number one, Ukraine's running out of people. Ukraine's been saying for a while, we're short of people. Number two, the military-industrial complex in the West is unable to produce weapons. So an industrial complex that can't produce weapons is going to produce them somehow magically and send them to a military that's out of people. And oh, by the way, the people that are producing these weapons are broke and have no energy to run their factories. The whole thing is a twisted, sick fantasy that you have to be absolutely ignorant of everything that's going on to read an article like that and think that there's any truth to it, and that it's anything other than neocon propaganda.
How about we get to, I think this is a good place to transition to what has occurred in China over the last several days. It begins with the SCO summit, and there's been a lot of panic from especially the establishment in the collective West. Donald Trump himself has made comments. Here's the New York Times says Putin is finding a growing embrace on the global stage. Eurasian leaders eagerly met the Russian leader at a summit. They didn't name the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but at a summit, as President Trump has helped ease isolation over the war in Ukraine. The SCO summit brought some very concrete developments, especially when it comes to China-India relations. Russia-China relationship has just got stronger with the Power of Siberia pipeline inked now. And then there was the parade, the World War II, the victory over Japanese aggression celebration, the 80th anniversary of this. Donald Trump had some choice words about this celebration as the parade was about to start, where he essentially says, please give my warmest regards to Putin and Kim Jong-un. This is his message to China, as you conspire against the United States, and whether Xi Jinping would be mentioning in his remarks, mentioning his remarks about U.S. support to China during the Second World War, maybe not understanding that China was fighting Japan for many, many years before the U.S. entered the war. And then there is just the optics of this, as well as what has been accomplished. And Scott, I want to get your reaction as I pull this up, whether it is Putin, Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping, all walking together, greeting veterans. And then, of course, the promise that Putin made about Kim Jong-un visiting Russia. There's a lot of developments taking place here around this. What was your reaction to all of this? And then I didn't even mention China's presenting new achievements in its military-industrial complex. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, nothing was unexpected. North Korea sent troops to fight in the Kursk region. 101 dead. Successfully repelling NATO-trained Ukrainian forces. So why are we surprised that Putin and Kim Jong-un embrace? We knew they were going to embrace. We knew they're friends. We know they have a strategic relationship. Xi and Putin have been talking for some time. There's been phone calls going back and forth. I mean, every time these guys meet, it's friendly. None of this takes anybody by surprise who's been watching this. This didn't just happen out of the blue. This is part of years of solid relations between these guys, these three leaders who have been, who are naturally inclined to support each other to begin with, but have been, compelled to accelerate the pace of their collaboration because of the irresponsible policies of the United States and Europe, and seeking to target and isolate all three of these countries. So, and if you've been following China's weapons programs, nothing took you by surprise. It's all publicly available. We've talked about it all. It's all there. This is just reality manifesting itself, and the New York Times and the West is now just waking up to the fact that this is happening. I think one of the things that, again, it's not a surprise, but, people should pick up on is that the dollar is dead. After this Shanghai meeting, the dollar is finished. There's no, whatever chance we had, we being the United States, of retaining not dollar dominance, but dollar relevance, is over. It's finished. It's done. And it's all because of us. It's all because of Scott Bessent. Hey, Donald Trump, if you're listening to this, fire your Secretary of Treasury. It would be the best move you made after firing your Secretary of State. Both Russophobes who don't want to have peace and aren't looking for prosperity. Their policies are destroying America's credibility. But none of this should take anybody by surprise. There's nothing that happened in China as part of this Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit that is surprising. It's you could have written this in advance. Anybody who knows, Danny, the area. You could have written this. You could have written this, and you would have been 100% correct. 98. It might have been 2% surprises in there. But the point is, none of this took anybody by surprise, because anybody who's been watching what's going on, this was the most predictable outcome imaginable. So I just see the West, again, just proving just how utterly irrelevant they are. The mainstream media, what a joke. I mean, the New York Times is just literally, I wouldn't even insult my bird by putting it as liner in a bird cage. So anyways, that's my take.
Yeah, Andrei, to you, what was your reaction to the events that occurred? Maybe you could particularly talk to some of the things that Scott mentioned that were rolled out militarily. I'll even put one up that all of you can react to as we circle back around. There was this in particular that shocked some people. The DF-5C intercontinental ballistic missile, which can hold multiple nuclear warheads and has a very big global strike radius. And I'll just play it here as you speak. Go, Andrei.
Scott, again, pretty much stated it all. The fundamental thing is Shanghai Cooperation Organization achieved was, apart from many other things, as correctly stated, there's a power of Siberia too, essentially. It is being called now differently, but yeah, it's essentially, that's what it is. It is mandatory now. It is inked. And of course, the bank. Yeah. And very many people thought that there are, for example, and let's be very frank with this. Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it's kind of like the, not quite, but in some very remote sense, is the security and military, if you wish, representation of the BRICS economies, in this integration which is happening. And so obviously the bank, and you have to understand, when they say that, oh yeah, we are opening this bank, that means what? The preliminary job has been done. All bugs basically have been worked out, and it's completely independent from the international, what it used to be called international, in reality, dollar system. So dollar will continue to be circulating as another currency, and many people still misunderstood that. They wanted to see some kind of BRICS currency. There will be no BRICS currency. People in China love their yuan, Russians love their ruble, Indians love their rupee, and on and on and on. But there will be obviously the mechanism in place, which will be, conversion, so to speak. They might come up with some convertible unit, so something similar like it was with the French franc at some point of time, or not French franc, pardon me, Swiss franc, when in terms of the international certain international accounts. So it's probably something like this, but it is absolutely irrelevant. It's like what happened with Lloyd. That is why British London, the official London, hate Russian gods. They said, oh yeah, we will not insure your ships. Russia said, okay, we will. We are much richer than you are. You are paupers. We are a very rich, wealthy country. And guess what? That was it. So suddenly, this is very simple, really. And yeah, Scott absolutely correctly stated that it wasn't a surprise to anybody who has a half brain actually remaining and who has the IQ above room temperature in Fahrenheit, that to see what is happening. We have been warning, all of us, Garland, Scott, me, a bunch of other people, about this coming for years. For years. It's not like we said this, oh yeah, look at my blog, for example, 2014. I already stated, boy, United States and combined West, screwed it up, essentially, after the events in Crimea and then the start, essentially, of the war in Ukraine, which started really in 2014, not really 2022. So, and that's the new world, brave new world. That's the new reality. Militarily, it's already now the most powerful military bloc. So whatever will be happening after that, there will be basically the arrangement phase of things, how they settle, they set up the mechanisms, economic mechanisms. And in terms of military, Russians and Chinese, they are very close. It's not a secret that there are joint, not only exercises, now they jointly fly patrols. Now there is a next one jointly doing the submarine patrols in the Sea of Japan and what have you. So yeah, it's the new world. What can I say?
Yeah. Garland, your reaction to the events that happened at the SCO as well as the parade?
Well, my first thought was this. Okay, so Russia and its allies are building pipelines, right? And you've got, China, Russia putting together big money to do it. Why? Because there's a certain level of trust. They've got other countries they're going to have to go through. Meanwhile, the West is blowing up their own damn pipelines. The United States is blowing up Germany's pipelines. Denmark's helping them cover it up. There's no honor amongst thieves in the West. They're robbing each other, blowing up each other's infrastructure. There is absolutely no trust. Now they're covering it up, hiding it up. I mean, they have to hide it and all this kinds of stuff, while the trust there is certainly present. And you couldn't, I put it like this. What company in their right mind, if they were in Europe now, would invest in some gigantic pipeline project, knowing that if at any point the U.S. empire decided they didn't like that project, they'd blow it to hell, and their own government would help them cover it up? Those types of massive infrastructure projects right now are a thing of the past. And by the way, they can't afford them if they wanted to do them. But I think that Nord Stream pipeline debacle will go down as one of the foundational events that doomed the West and that doomed Europe and Germany's industrial machine. And if right now, no one I don't think would sign the kinds of contracts that have been signed at the SCO, that have been signed at, probably Vladivostok and St. Petersburg and some of these other major economic forums they have. You just don't do that in Europe because there's no guarantee that at some point, for some political reason, that it won't get blown to smithereens. So I see trust. I see a willingness to invest. And I see people who will come together. The only issue they'll have is, they'll probably have to have drones and cameras and things like that to protect their pipelines and their infrastructure from these lunatics. But they will be able to proceed forward with these kinds of projects that require trust and major financial investments.
Yeah, Scott, before I get back to you, because I know our other two esteemed guests do have time constraints that are a bit more constraining. I'll kick it back to Andrei and then to you, Garland, for your final reactions on this. I wanted for you, Andrei, military analyst, your expertise, talk about the message that this sends, because China did roll out this what's called the Dhaiphong, the East Wind FC strategic international nuclear missile, which has a powerful strike range. It's important to note, I'll just say this, that China does have a no first use policy, but they did show this during the parade, and many people reacted to it very strongly. What do you make of this, as well as just the overall development, both of China and Russia's military-industrial complex? Because I think both of them have been growing quite rapidly over the last several decades or so, to now where they have these impressive achievements. What's your assessment of this?
I don't know why they react. I mean, China have been able to demonstrate, not on all of its systems, but on some intercontinental ballistic missiles, that they are indeed intercontinental, they fly and they hit the targets. So in this case, whenever people go and compare this to, what Hiroshima, and Nagasaki nuclear explosions, I mean, you can have the megaton type, thermonuclear warhead, and it's normal if you need to, but it's all about also the ability to carry the multiple things such as like Avangard, which are truly hypersonic maneuverable vehicles. So it's natural development of the technologies. And what can I say? It's normal. I mean, it's you would expect with the from the country with immense economies, industrial economies such as China, and definitely very fast developing scientific, applied science fields, that they will be able to develop something like this. It's absolutely no surprise, and I don't know why people just going bananas over it. China simply demonstrated that here's the capability. They rolled it out on the Tiananmen and showed it to the world that we're capable. So there you go. We can sit in here and talk a lot about the shortcomings which Chinese have, which they do, especially in terms of the naval deployment, and still especially its submarine force. But there's no doubt they are developing their serious military industrial base and some weapons. So it's absolutely normal organic development of all. If you have the gigantic industries like China has, okay, China builds now this surface fleet with the rate unheard of in the development. Only the United States during the World War II was capable to produce this gigantic numbers of the combat ships. But don't forget, those were combat ships of the 1940s. These are modern combat ships. They require completely different technologies. They are very expensive for the most part. So you look at the shipbuilding, Chinese shipbuilding industry. I don't have enough verbiage to describe it. It's more than monstrous. It's just insane. Okay? It's just simple insane. And when I explain to people, I always get this number. China produces, in terms of steel and iron, which are required, 10 times order of magnitude than Russia produces, while Russia produces in terms of steel and iron slightly more than the United States, slightly more when you put those together. So, and that tells you the scale of things. So, and what can I say? That's organic development. Listen, I gotta run, guys. I really appreciate seeing you, Scott. Don't allow to Mr. Tardio to ever, to basically I mean, I almost shot the screen, honestly. I mean, why did he do this? I don't know. So,
Well, Andrei, good to see you. I'll
good to
be
see
back
you
with you
guys.
again
Yeah.
soon.
So, all right, guys.
All right. All right. Garland, same question to you. I'm also going to pull up because, as Scott always says, war is an extension of politics. And I wanted to just show this image, which has been going around, the difference between Western leaders and the leaders of this rising multipolar world. Garland, your thoughts. I know that you have some time constraints too, so I wanted to get to you.
Yeah, well, one of the things I think that I see is China making the point that we have a nuclear deterrent force. I think they understand the danger of the U.S.'s diabolical plot to take China out, and that because of the inability of the U.S. to use conventional means to attack China or to go to war with China, that they would plan to either utilize, well, in some combination, to utilize proxies such as the Philippines, etc., and to use some kind of there have been inferences that could cause one to believe that there are people in the Pentagon, or at least in the higher echelons of political power in the U.S., that think they could maybe use some type of tactical nukes or some type of nuclear force against the Chinese. And I think the Chinese are just sending a message that says, don't think about it. Don't even think about any plan that because you have more nukes than us, that you'll be able to attack us with some kind of tactical, local, or intermediate nuclear weapons, and that we won't respond. That we do have the ability to reach out and touch you. And so I think that this is, while it's all dangerous, and I hate to see nuclear posturing because it's dangerous, and one wrong move and we're all gone. But I do understand what China's doing. They're acting truly in a deterrent manner to let the U.S. know, look, you understand that you're weak now conventionally, as far as particularly being able to sustain any kind of a military conflict against us or anyone else. So you may be inclined to think you could jump right to, above the force continuum immediately to nuclear weapons, but don't even think about it, because you're going to be hurt really bad, really fast if you do. And that is what nuclear deterrence is all about. I appreciate all of the good work Scott's doing to try to tone down all of this nuclear saber rattling that's going on around the world. I think we all have to support Scott in the work that he's doing to tone down the nuclear saber rattling. I think I'm sure Scott's going to do a lot of work going up into 2026 to deal with the potential for nuclear treaties expiring. And I think we all need to support Scott and do what we can to make sure that these things don't get out of control.
Yeah, Scott, that's exactly what I was thinking as I saw this, because China's very clear. If you watch the parade, the media that was covering it, everyone was saying, this is about deterrence. China's no first use policy is very much in play. It's not about necessarily sending a message that nuclear war is inevitable, but that it has capabilities to actually deter, not use the word, or maybe as Pete Hegseth uses it. But Scott, your reaction to this, because I was thinking about all what Garland just said, this work that you've been doing, and that we are at this point where countries like China feel like they need to show that they do have the ability to defend themselves with these capabilities, should it get to that. But the fact is that should we get to that, that's the problem here, it seems.
No, first of all, thank you, Garland. Thank you, Danny, for bringing up this work. It's important work. We're making some headway. We'll see what happens. But let's look at the DF5. It's a liquid engine. So people need to know that system that was laid out in those three parts, it's empty. It can't be fired. Those might even be mock-ups, because you wouldn't normally want to, have an operational missile subjected to the vibration going over the road. But the point is, there's 20 of these missiles in operational service. They take 2 hours to fuel. You got to pull them out of a tunnel. You got to raise it up, and then it takes 2 hours to fuel. And if we ever get to that point, China will have taken out American, so we wouldn't know that they're doing this. But it's not a first strike weapon. It's literally just a weapon that says, we have the ability to reach out and touch you and do some serious damage if if this war went south. 12 independently targeted warheads per 20 of those. That's 200 and got 40 cities that are gone, American cities. That's called nuclear deterrence. The Chinese have a better system. It's a DF-41. It's a solid rocket system in a silo. They built, I forget, 1,000 silos, and they've got a couple hundred of these, and they move them around like a giant shell game in Western China. And the U.S., in order to take them out, would have to hit all 1,000 silos to be sure, and that means a warhead per, but you got to put 2 warheads. That's 2,000. That's more than all the warheads we have under the New START Treaty. But we live in a very dangerous world. China is playing catch up right now. They, this is one of the big, destabilizing realities we have is that, because of the irresponsible policies of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, we have redesigned our war plans now so that we are talking about the potential of nuclear preemption of China. We've redone our warheads. Ted Postal is very good about this, talking about the fusing mechanisms on the W-76 warheads that are on the Trident submarines. But the Chinese are saying, well, wait a minute. So you guys are planning to preempt us, to take us out, to take away our deterrent. Well, then we're just going to build a whole bunch of nuclear weapons. We're going to get up to parity. But from the American perspective, let's say China has 1,550 deployed warheads. Russia has 1,550 deployed warheads. We have 1,550 deployed. We don't sit there and go, well, that's 3 equal nations. We go, well, that means that the Russians and the Chinese together have 3,100 warheads, and we're screwed. We got to get ahead of this curve. We got to stop this arms race before it gets going. But it's going to require the United States to be the responsible party, because the reason why the Russians modernized their nuclear forces and the Chinese are upgrading theirs and expanding theirs is because of irresponsible policies on the part of the United States that dates back to George W. Bush withdrawing from the ABM Treaty back in 2002. Donald Trump withdrawing from the INF Treaty in 2019. And now Donald Trump perhaps letting the New START Treaty, the last remaining arms control treaty, expire on February 4th or 5th of 2026. And if it's gone and there's nothing in its place, what's that old saying? Katie, bar the door. We're off for the races. It's going to be ugly. So, yeah, it's an important issue, and it's sometimes hard to keep focus on it because you take a look at everything else that's going around, not just in Ukraine, but you have the Iran danger taking place, nuclear armed. Israel, you have now the expansion of the conflict with the Houthi, you've got Gaza, and always over there on the horizon is Taiwan, just waiting to be invaded, apparently. So we live in a very dangerous world, and I think the world would be a better place if we could stop the spread of nuclear weapons and begin to live up to the promise of the NPT, not just stopping the spread, but actually starting to get rid of nuclear weapons. You don't need it. I was speaking with somebody, an analyst from Switzerland the other day, and he just basically said mutually assured destruction is just a fancy way of saying suicide. And, that's how we have to look at it. As long as we have nuclear weapons, we're literally just preparing to commit suicide. And I don't know. I think it would be a better world if we weren't preparing to commit suicide.
Yeah. And it's important, as you noted, Scott, also, get to the root cause of this, the irresponsible, aggressive policies of the United States over the last subsequent administrations, the current one and the prior one. Garland, before you head out, any final comments? Scott and I will stay on to cover some of these other areas that are taking unfortunately, our attention away and need attention from nuclear conflict. Your last thoughts?
Interesting was one of the things that I found interesting was the New York Times saying that Trump is easing Putin's isolation, and as absurd as that may sound to us, having paid attention to what was going on and followed this thing from the beginning and understanding that isolation simply means the West. doesn't like, the U.S. and its vassals or its allies, whatever you want to call it, doesn't like them. We understand that the majority of the world sees Russia as an integral, very important part of their future. It just shows me the level of delusion that we're dealing with, and the level of propaganda that we're dealing with, to put the American people in a situation where they're not able to make proper decisions, political decisions, decisions about their future and their children's future, because they've been so misguided, misled, and propagandized by the U.S. media. So again, guys, it's very important. What you're doing, Danny, what you're doing, Scott, whatever I try to do, what we're doing is critical. What we're doing is important, because you don't have a democracy. All this talk of democracy, I don't care what the voting looks like. I don't care if you use machines, paper ballots, all of these things. If people are voting because they believe that one guy's a werewolf and the other guy's a zombie and the other guy's a vampire, I don't care how pure the system is, you don't have democracy without informed voters, without an informed electorate. So I think it's important, Danny, keep up the good work, Scott, also, and we continue to try to inform the electorate and everybody in the chat. The most important thing you guys can do, and girls, is to share this stuff on all of your social media platforms. So that's kind of my out.
Yeah, of course. Well, great to see you again, Garland. We'll definitely be back in touch. Your YouTube channel is in the video description, so people can follow you too. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks a lot. See you guys later. Scott.
All right. Take care. All right. So, Scott, let us get to this final front that I wanted to cover, because developments have been occurring and it's been hard to keep up. So first, I wanted to talk to you about Israel has this, what often happens with Israel in this genocidal campaign in Gaza and its, of course, expansionist aims in the region. This kind of like weeks and weeks and weeks long preparation for what they're calling the occupation of Gaza City. There's been some hiccups with it. For example, the Israeli military is having a hard time calling up all of these. I think they want 60,000 reservists in addition to what they're already using in this campaign. And they're having trouble because people don't want to do it anymore. This has been going on now for over 2 years. Then there is the reality that it's not going to be so easy to just waltz into Gaza with thousands upon thousands of troops. And there are already ambushes and various actions taken by those forces, Hamas and other resistance groups, on August 30th, were reportedly captured. And Israel has been blacking this story out completely in the neighborhood of Zaytun. But in Zaytun, in Gaza, the fighting continues. And many are wondering whether the casualty rates for Israel will just go sky high if they decide to send tens of thousands deep into the heart of Gaza. And then you have Yemen, Scott. Yemen just experienced a major decapitation strike by Israel, which killed several of their generals and political leaders. But they continue their operations nonetheless. So they're firing these missiles. And one interesting development about these missiles, Scott, is that now they have what they're calling a cluster missile that's capable of essentially firing multiple warheads within one strike, which is causing some problems for Israeli air defenses. Scott, what's your reaction to these developments and where things are at here?
Well, first of all, Israel's not going to win this war. There is no plan. I don't know how many times. It's like watching the Germans, rush troops into the Barricade factory in Stalingrad. I don't care how many times you get in fresh troops, you run in, the Soviets were dug in and they will repel you. Hamas is going nowhere. You said we're, coming up on 2 years on this conflict. The fact of the matter is, Israel estimated that at the beginning of this, Hamas and Islamic Jihad had between 30 and 40,000 active combatants. And after 2 years of war, Israel says they've killed 8,900 of them. but those aren't trigger pullers. I mean, the number of trigger pullers is probably less than half of that. Many of those 8,900 are postmen, teachers, anybody who took a paycheck from Hamas. If you were a man of military age and you were paid by Hamas in any function, you were considered to be a Hamas militant and counted in the casualties. But the number of trigger pullers actually killed by Israel is extraordinarily small. And the other thing is that Hamas has had a very successful recruiting campaign during this conflict, especially during the brief ceasefire that existed. They were able to draw on even more manpower. Their tunnel network is over 80% intact. The Israelis will just continue to be slaughtered, and we're seeing the Hamas have greater success in terms of, taking out larger numbers of Israelis and planned ambushes. And as the Israeli will to continue the struggle drops, mistakes will be made. They'll get sloppy on the battlefield. Hamas won't get sloppy, and the number of casualties will increase. Politically, this is an unsustainable situation for Israel. Netanyahu is desperate. That's why he's talking about this need to carry out what is in effect the modern day version of the Warsaw Ghetto clearance operation carried out by the Nazis using their Ukrainian proxies. This is what Netanyahu and his right-wing genocidal maniacs are proposing, to physically annihilate the Palestinians, to remove them. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, made some stupid statement about bulldozing the Negev and displacing these people, as if he has no understanding of what international humanitarian law is. Oh, he doesn't. And, doesn't understand what a war criminal is. He is one. Israel's just not going to win this. We see increasing pushback by the Israeli population, hundreds of thousands in the streets. It's curious. I always note that the former commanders of the U.S. nuclear forces, Strategic Command, and all that, when they retire, almost without exception, they all immediately go, we've got to get rid of all nuclear weapons. We've got to go to global zero, no more nukes. But while they were commanders, they're like, we've modernized our strike plan and we're ready to do. I mean, there's hardly any retired Israeli intelligence people or generals who are supporting this campaign. Almost, I forget the number that signed the letter, but it was a very big number. Almost everybody said this war is stupid. We have to stop this war. We're not winning this war. Haaretz just came out with a front page story that said something to the effect that the Palestinians have shown themselves to be the greatest people in modern history when it comes to defending their homeland. And the choice of words is interesting, their homeland, recognizing that there is a Palestinian homeland. Israel's just not going to win. And it's this is where I get in trouble, but screw it, I don't care. Israel was never going to win. I've said this from the beginning. But as you indicated, I also say that war is an extension of politics by other means. I firmly believe that Sinwar and the other Hamas planners knew what they were doing when they initiated October 7th. This was not a panicked plan. This was very carefully executed to achieve a very specific result. And that result was to get Israel to go into Gaza. And then to let Israel be Israel. That was the plan. And only by letting Israel be Israel would the world wake up to the horrific reality of what Israel actually is. You see, Israel has been able to disguise itself in this veneer of civilization. I mean, letting many Americans believe that they're literally just a 51st state. I mean, we just speak Hebrew, but we're just like you. I know that's what it was when I visited Israel. They were so proud of their close relationship with America. We're just like you, but they're not, because they spy on us. They kill our sailors. Don't ever forget the Liberty incident. These aren't our friends. They commit mass murder. These are horrible people, horrible. The Zionists are horrible. We've pretended for far too long that Israel is a respectable nation, that maybe some people make mistakes, but Israel, there's nothing. No, the vast majority of the Israeli people support what's going on against the Palestinians. The people in the street aren't like, let's stop the war because we're murdering the Palestinians. They're saying, let's stop the war because we want our hostages back. That's it. They sit there, they don't shed a tear. Just the other day, 7 children lining up to get water because Israel's cut off water, and the Israelis bombed them, killing these children and other adults there for the crime of being thirsty. Hamas was genius in letting Israel be Israel. And look what's happening today. The world is turning their back on Israel. Israel's finished. It's finished. Everybody recognizes them for what they are. It's a horrific, genocidal, murderous state who can only exist if they feed off of the land of the Palestinians. Israel has no legitimacy anymore, not in the eyes of anybody except the Trump administration. But Donald Trump himself admitted that in America, support for Israel is rapidly eroding because Americans are waking up and seeing the reality of this genocidal, parasitic nation. So I think we're looking at not a strategic Israeli victory that Netanyahu was talking about, the strategic Israeli defeat that will bring about not just the military defeat of the IDF in Gaza, but it will bring about economic collapse. Nobody wants to invest in Israel anymore. Societal collapse. People have lost faith in their government. And ultimately the demise of this Zionist entity.
And Scott, it logically pushes toward a war with Iran, which was demonstrated back in June of 2025, that such a war would be very difficult for Israel to fight, if not impossible. And, all those elements that you listed, also we can add in the fact that the more Israel does this, the more regional adversaries it's going to build. It already has a very strong one that despite a huge decapitation strike when it comes to Yemen's Ansar Allah, they are not stopping. Actually, they are escalating. They're hitting more ships now in the Red Sea. They're firing different kinds of missiles at Israel. And while we always knew, Scott, going in that Israel had, quote unquote, military superiority, they could kill a lot of people. They've done this and they're going to continue to do it. I think the broader context here speaks to a different reality. I mean, I think about, for example, slavery in the United States. It's a really ugly history, but it's one that lasted a long time, but it eventually ended because of, one, the fight back against it, and two, the impossibility of it continuing for that and many other factors. It seems like Israel has gotten itself into a very similar kind of situation, or at least that's how I see it. When we look at the entire context, Scott, what do you see?
I mean, Israel's bitten off more than it can chew, and the United States can't resolve this. Yes, Israel has American-provided aircraft and American-provided intelligence, and they can go in and, yes, they killed the prime minister of the Houthi-led government in Yemen and 11 of his ministers when they were having a ministerial meeting. It wasn't a military meeting. The vast majority of the ministers killed dealt with sport and infrastructure and things of that nature. But the Israelis killed them using real-time intelligence. It's curious what the Houthi did afterwards. They raided the United Nations aid buildings and arrested 11 people that took various electronic communications means. I think the Houthi know who tipped off the Israelis. The Israelis have infiltrated the United Nations aid organization. I just want to bring this up, given the screaming that Israel does about allegations of how Hamas has infiltrated UN aid organizations in Gaza. The hypocrisy of Israel is on display. But that doesn't stop the Houthi. You can't stop the Houthi. The Houthi believe in what they're doing. They're not going to stop. And they're firing these missiles. You mentioned this new missile with that disperses several warheads. If employed, the warhead will be dispensed before intercept, which means now, right now the Israelis basically fire 2 missiles per inbound missile to shoot it down if they're successful. But now if you separate, I think there's up to 6 warheads. This means now to shoot down this missile, you're going to have, a minimum of 12 interceptors fired. So right off the bat, it's an economic victory for the Houthi. And they've borrowed this technology or they've acquired this technology from Iran. Iran has been testing very similar missiles, I think, with even greater capacity for damage. if Israel wants to have a fight with Iran, there's a lot of talk about it right now. It won't be a fight that ends well with Israel. All the advantages that Israel had in the first round, the surprise attack, American collusion in setting the Iranians up, the Mossad's decade-long preparation with drones, that's not going to be there. The negotiations that Israel had with Azerbaijan to fly through their airspace, to come across the Caspian Sea and strike Tehran from the rear, that window won't be open anymore. So, Israel didn't get any stronger. Iran, on the other hand, has. They've accelerated the pace of their ballistic missile development, which tells you that all the Israeli efforts to degrade ballistic missile production during the 12-day war have failed. Iran has said, look, we made heavy use of missiles that were 20 to 30 years old in the first go-around in the 12-day war. Now we have the good stuff, and it'll be a different fight if this starts again. So I don't know if Israel is really anxious to get into another fight with Iran. We've seen the United States start to withdraw military resources from the region because they understand the vulnerability, and that the next time around they're not going to have this game of conflict termination where the Iranians let Trump fly his B-2 in to bomb empty targets, and then Trump evacuates his base so the Iranians can fire missiles and strike a radar in an otherwise empty target. They're not going to have this kind of game. The next time around, it's going to be for blood. And the Iranians will have a tremendous capacity to draw blood. And both Israel and the United States know this. So I hear Professor Morandi, who I have deep respect for. I hear you. I hear others, who are talking about, this real potential of a conflict. But I don't see Israel really wanting to start this war, because I think Israel understands that it's not going to come out on the winning side.
Yeah, I've seen reports from people like Trita Parsi who say this could happen before the new year again. And but I 100% agree with your assessment. If they do it or not, I don't know. Israel, they tend to do what they like. But this is I think you're exactly right. This would be not. It would not be a cakewalk. It would be much worse than that. And then I want your final maybe thoughts as we begin to close here, Scott, on Donald Trump's handling of this whole situation, because, of course, genocide continues. The region itself is really, people are seeing this, and there are some people who thump their chests, especially on the pro-Israeli side. They look how invincible we are. Look what we're doing in Syria. We're still, wanton murdering people in Lebanon, Gaza, of course, and then Iran. There's a cessation of hostilities there. So look, we're doing so well, but at the same time, Scott, there is the reality that at any point a civil war, the 2.0, it seems like, could ignite in Lebanon. Syria is far from stable. And of course, you have the unpredictability of Israeli leadership, as desperate as it is. And then you have Donald Trump's leaked plan to develop Gaza, which essentially calls for, I don't know if you saw this, Scott, it's called the Gaza Reconstruction Economic Acceleration and Transformation Plan, the Great Trust. What it essentially calls for is paying people in Gaza, Palestinians, to leave, which is almost like another right of return disaster, a Nakba type situation, but basically to pay them to leave, to go somewhere else, so then the U.S. Can develop it, the Kushners of the world, and then they'll be able to come back, maybe, perhaps. But what has been your take on how the Trump administration has handled this particular situation, as there's been a lot of, you say, blunders when it comes to the trade war, the Russia-Ukraine situation being what it is, not really for the U.S. to decide at this point. But here, the Trump administration has taken kind of almost a very definitive position. What's your assessment on how it's been doing?
Well, if you want to give Donald Trump a grade for following through with his campaign commitments, he gets an A, because he said he will support Israel. He's an Israeli supporter. He built a cabinet that, I think, in order to get through the door, you had to basically put Israel first. And so he's delivered. And if you have that cabinet, they will produce the policies that get us what we have today: blind support for Israel, regardless of the nefarious nature of what Israel is doing. And I want to remind people listening that every crime that you and I and others articulate regarding Israel and what they've done to Gaza, the United States is culpable in this crime. If we went to trial, we would be found guilty of murder along with the Israelis, because we facilitated this. This isn't just being the getaway driver in a bank robbery gone bad. This is us actually planning the bank robbery, providing the explosives, the guns, the bullets, ordering the Israeli bank robber to kill people. I mean, we're in many ways worse than the Israelis are when it comes to this, because we know that this wouldn't happen unless we facilitated it, and yet here we are facilitating it nonetheless. It's a dark day for America. It's for America and for the American people. It's a shame. The only good news is that even here inside America, the winds of change appear to start to blow here. Donald Trump himself had to confess that the Israeli lobby no longer has the iron grip support, the control over the U.S. Congress. Trump admitted Israel bought the Congress. I mean, this is sitting president of the United States saying, yeah, Israel bought and he's not doing anything about it because he's already sold his soul to that devil. But I think there's a growing recognition in the United States that continued support of Israel, blind support of Israel, is problematic. It goes against everything we stand for collectively as a people, and we, for the sake of humanity, has to be stopped. And I think that's the direction that we're heading. We're not going to get there overnight. It'll take time, but the Palestinian people have struggled for so long. When you look at the overall narrative of their struggle, we are close to the finish. It may still be some ways off, but when you look at the totality of their struggle, we're in the end game here, and I do think it's going to end poorly for Israel.
Yeah, Scott, when we think about ending poorly for Israel, the latest polls, there are polls all the time, and this was a big election issue, as you might remember. It's actually probably one of the biggest reasons why Donald Trump beat Kamala Harris was the fact that she was the face of genocide at that time. She was the face of what was going on in Gaza. The latest polls are showing, Scott, that only roughly 30% of people in the United States, and that's just 30% of people polled, support what's going on. And then you even have in Israel, you were 100% correct and are 100% correct. 80, 90 plus % of Israelis have no empathy for Palestinians. Worse than that, they're okay with their slaughter, but they also want to see this end because many see it as, one, there have been a lot of Israelis who have been sacrificed at the altar of this, none the least the prisoners of war called hostages, which were taken on October 7th, many of them killed during this time by Israel. So your reaction to this, like, why then does Israel continue? Like, is there a strategic value of Gaza beyond just displacing all the Palestinians? Trump, in his plan, appears to see it as almost a way to take or maintain maybe dominance in West Asia through economic development, American style.
The thing about Gaza is that Israel and the United States have already shown that they can take control of the Palestinian narrative. Mohammed Abbas is bought and paid for. Abu Mazen, he's owned by the United States and Israel. Fatah has stopped being an effective resistance movement for many years. They're now just basically an extension of the Israeli security forces. The Palestinians in diaspora are a confused bunch of people who, cut their own throats by cheering the demise of Bashar al-Assad, cheering on Jolani, this al-Qaeda terrorist in Syria, not understanding that you're breaking the back of the axis of resistance that helped, facilitate, the ongoing resistance. The only resistance taking place is in Gaza. That's it. Hamas. And Israel once Hamas gone, so does the United States. This is one of those existential issues, and Hamas isn't going anywhere. If any political party has emerged from this conflict, having demonstrated that it cares about, the creation of a Palestinian state, it's Hamas. And so the idea that it's going to be erased, that they're going to be evicted, is absurd in the extreme. The Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu, is a government that's fighting against, various tides of change. One of the big tides of change is linked to the corruption of Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife, Sarah. If this war ever ends, and his government will collapse because his government can't survive in peacetime, it's a wartime government, he will be taken to trial and found guilty of corruption. He will spend the rest of his life in jail, where he belongs. But we're also seeing additional investigations into his conduct as prime minister, the mishandling of classified information, the deliberate lying and deception to the Israeli people about the hostage situation, ill preparedness on October 7th, on and on and on we go. This is a failed leader whose only ability to sustain himself in power is by continuing to hype up the threat of, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthi, Iran, and that Israel needs me. You can't change horses mid-stride and things of that nature. So Israel will continue to go down this path because the politicians that are guiding Israel today need this conflict in order to survive. When this conflict is over, they're gone and they know it. So they're looking for sort of the equivalent of a perpetual war, which is what you get in Gaza if you talk about depopulation and all this stuff. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take forever. But it creates a perpetual concept of conflict that allows the legitimization of the Ben Gavirs and the Katzes and these other just instant. I forget, there's a Smernich or Smith, or I don't know what his name is, but he's a horrible individual who just promotes genocide. I think that's why this war can't end. That's why Israel won't allow this war to end, because if this war ends, then they're all gone. And Hamas will never surrender. I think that's the other reality that's emerging here is it doesn't matter what Donald Trump and Jared Kushner and Marco Rubio and anybody else says about Hamas. Hamas is there. And they've already dared you to come and dig them out, and nobody can. So God bless the Palestinian people. God bless the resistance. And God bless Hamas for putting up a hell of a fight against overwhelming odds and beating them. And people might get mad at me for saying this, but if you don't recognize that Israel is the evil party here, that Israel is the one that's doing, the devil's work, gosh, then there's not much I can do for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be, if these tens of thousands of reservists end up marching into Gaza, the scenes are about to get a lot more difficult to black out, as Israel often tries to do. Scott, one question from a super chat says, is it possible in exchange quickly, as we're running out of time here, but is it possible in exchange for looking the other way, the U.S. requires Israel to get U.S. permission to launch their nuclear weapons?
Now, Israel has a long-standing agreement with the United States. It dates back to the Nixon administration about the protocol for using nuclear weapons. Israel isn't a law unto itself. There is an agreement that was reached that Israel is obliged to comply with, or else will find themselves on the wrong side of U.S. law and global nonproliferation policies. And so, and Israel has on occasion initiated the protocol that's linked to eventually declaring itself to be a nuclear power. But so there's no look the other way. There's no deal. The deal has already been made. The deal's there, and it has not been altered.
Well, everyone, it was a great show today. Be sure to hit the like button before you go. You can find all of our guests' information in the video description below. We have Scott's YouTube channel. He does rants very frequently, Ritter's rants, which are definitely worth watching. Whether you agree, disagree, it doesn't matter. They definitely hold a lot of value. You have Andrei's YouTube channel, GARLAND's as well. Scott, anything else you'd like to plug before we head out of here?
Well, I'm just midway through this Project 38 thing we talked about earlier, the nuke stuff. The Russia trip was extraordinarily valuable in planting the seeds to bring about the potential of change. We're working on doing things. I don't know if people saw my Substack, scottritter.com, but we myself and a group of other Americans that we call ourselves the Poughkeepsie Peace Initiative, we wrote an open letter to Donald Trump, beginning what we hope is a process of coordination and consultation about the extension of the New START treaty. And we're moving forward. And I just want to thank everybody who has who's donated and supported in this. So far, it couldn't have happened without you. We still have a ways to go. So anybody else that wants to support, but thank you everybody who's stepped up to the plate. We wouldn't have gotten this far without you, and we're doing some pretty cool stuff.
That's awesome, Scott. Yeah, your Substack is now in the video description below. So as you are going to like the video so more people can see it, go to the video description. Make sure you check all of that out on Scott's Substack. Without further ado, everyone, I'll be back again soon this weekend. But until then, take care. See you later. 再见. That's Chinese. Goodbye. I will see you all again then. Bye-bye.